Diyan, impact yung what's happening with the immigrants? Kasi yun ang pinakamalaking concern ng mga Filipinos dito, no? Because nandito kami, but I think a lot of Filipinos have relatives in the US, of course, and they're worried. Anong mangyayari? What will happen?
Will they be deported?
Yes po, Tita Amy. So,
Tita Amy.
take care, change that. But so, as soon as President Trump gets inaugurated and as soon as 1201 hits, when he becomes the 47th President of the United States, he's going to be establishing executive orders. And a lot of that po is to secure the borders. I think like what he did sa una niyang inauguration in his first hours after he was sworn in as president, he really changed with his executive orders the course of the start of his presidency po. So I think and that's what he's been promising in the campaign and on the stump. So I think sa first hour you'll see all these executive orders that he's going to be signing into law and for the executive branch to start enforcing. A lot of that sa immigration po. In terms of the immigration deportation, ang sinabi niya through his next Secretary Homan for Homeland Security is to make sure that he focuses on the prioritize of the criminals first, the first million. So a lot of that is going to be the top criminals that's been on this list. Currently under the Biden administration, they have already 1 million orders already that's not really being executed by the current Chief Executive Officer of the United States right now, current Commander-in-Chief. So yun po ang tutuloy niya. And then we're gonna go down to the processes. And I've seen the Philippine Embassy advisories when it comes to this type of immigration process and issues to, they've recommended for self-deportation for folks that have been there para hindi sila ma-deport ng current administration.
From your perspective, does that make sense? Self-deportation as advised by the Philippine Embassy in the US?
I would rather do that than be deported by the American government.
Kasi wala nang balikan. If
at least now you'll still have a chance to fight for your case and to at least to
a small
not
chance.
be deported. Correct. A fighting chance, as Mali like to say.
But also, see, Trump is known for his, you might call it brinkmanship, diba? Sometimes when he makes announcements and declarations, parang sometimes they sound fantabulous.
He backpedals.
Like
I was asking John about this deportation because a lot of farm workers harvesting the vegetables and the fruits in the U.S. are illegal.
Illegals.
A lot of those collecting the garbage, cleaning the drainage are illegal. So who will collect them if they will be deported? So.
Opo, I think that's a really good question. I think that focuses the question on that business owner as well, who's been supporting those policies, right? I know a lot of these immigrants, legal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, however you want to call them, they have also now some tax ID numbers already, right? They're still paying some stuff.
They do.
So now...
Even the number one in our Senate survey, Erwin Tulfo, admits that he was illegal for 20 years, in the U.S.
But he came back and self-deported, right? So, but
no, he didn't self-deport. He held on to his U.S. passport until
it was
the U.S.
discovered.
Embassy finds out
we're
revoking your passport because it's fake.
Wow, I did not know that.
Because your U.S. passport is based on fake documents.
Yes.
So it was not a voluntary thing. It was more.
They just found out. But in terms of that,
Tatanong ko, John, I want to clarify that. If you self-deport, can you still apply for immigration status?
yes po, but it's gonna be hard because the new thing now po is you're gonna see a lot of these agencies are working together. So if they see a name, they see your point of entry was this date, but your visa date expands to this, then you're gonna be put in a new pipeline of where you're gonna be pushed for deportation or a case for...
Dadaan ka sa butas ng karayom para makabalik.
Opo. But the idea of that po is in terms of the Americans that are there and even for the legal immigrants, right? Why this is such a big issue. It's not only the illegal immigrants that's picking up strawberries or yung mga nagfa-farm, but paano po yung mga legal nating immigrants na nagpunta na po sa Amerika na ang tagal-tagal ng proseso, na nandun na sila, pero naaagawan sila ng trabaho ng mga illegal immigrants as well. So in terms of a Filipino-American's perspective, kaya po yung mga botante natin na nakita natin sa Arizona, sa Nevada, you're gonna see some of these first we call them low propensity voters. They're the first time voters, or they vote every other election cycle. That's what some of the issues that they got really tired of.
Yeah, but John, let's call a spade a spade. A lot of legal Filipino immigrants won't work in the farms. They won't work in the garbage collection. They won't work in the drainage cleaning. They won't be I know a lot of congressmen who has kasambahay in their houses, no, with no papers or false documents. So a lot of those legal would go to the health sector. They will go. I know a lot of them. No, they have 2 to 3 jobs. No, and they will go to the banks. They will go to IT. The legal Filipinos. No? But most of them won't go to the farms. No, under the heat of the sun, harvesting or cleaning the garbage or cleaning the drainage. So it's different for the illegal Filipinos and for the legal Filipinos. They not necessarily look negatively with the TNT, no, because they won't try to get their jobs.
Of course.
Because
But they're still, then they Filipino, and they want to make sure that how are you going to advance, right? And so in terms of this types of jobs, I think they are still in a position to do that. And some folks in some of the Filipino communities, when they first got there, some of them might not necessarily have a first job that might be in the better sector already, that they're still going to do whatever it takes to kind of pay the first year or so, right? And they're going to try to do what it takes. But to them, when they first come here, some of those benefits, right, are also given to the illegal immigrants, where if you're a legal immigrant and a Filipino, and you might not get the same benefits that you're getting already. So
but
that's
another. But even the illegals are contributing to the economy. No, most of them have papers where they pay taxes.
You can say that, but they don't pay their fair share of taxes, right? Because they still pay 100% remittance, maybe, or send back immediately back home, right? You know, and not necessarily the Filipinos or Hispanic workers or any of those undocumented workers.
You said earlier that Trump will focus on those with criminal liabilities, no? And second, what will be the second? Is this the ones coming from the crossing the wall? No, because that's a very focused statement of the incoming president. No?
I think
build the wall. No?
Right.
So will that be the second?
I honestly think it comes down to the criminal priority of how these folks have broken the law. How I'm sure they're going to be tiered in one way or another. It all depends on how Secretary Homan, kung anong gagawin niya para i-enforce yung plan or i-execute yung plan that Trump wants. Because you're not only looking at the southern border as well, you're looking at some of the northern border part, right? Because sometimes it's hidden. You're seeing a lot more Middle Easterns coming in from the north of the border to the United States, right? That are not as vetted maybe in the southern
Even
border.
Chinese.
And Chinese as well.
There's a
And
lot
they're
of
coming
Chinese.
from the southern border too. I'm talking to Filipino communities and they're like, kung yung mga inchik na yun nakakadaan sa southern border, dapat ganun din kami. And I'm like, oh, that's not a bad point, and you come in. And so those are some of the things that really causes concern because hindi lang from the southern border. They're coming from all over South America. But the biggest thing that Trump really wants to put in play right now is that stay in Mexico. Keep in Mexico program right now where instead of when you apply for that asylum process that you are in the United States while that's being processed, that you're remaining in Mexico before you get approved to go to the United States.
Talking about Mexico, Trump earlier said that he's going to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico.
I love it.
The Gulf of the
I love it. I think it's great.
But the Mexicans are saying Mexico was there before the U.S.
but was that a serious thing? You think that was a serious proposal?
I think that this president has done a great job of marketing issues back to the United States. For the past 4 years, we've had a commander-in-chief that falls asleep in national conferences, right? Or falls in trips, and now the world leaders don't know what they're doing. I'm sure there is a room somewhere in Beijing that is just fully focused on what is Trump trying to do with these tweets, right? And so now I think he's encouraging and creating a pressure, especially to China, without being directly towards China.
So, John, what you're saying that most of these are tactical.
I think so. I think so because I
Pero
mean,
John, is that hyperbole lang ba yan? That he wants,
Like
he
the
wants
Duterte
the
formula.
Panama Canal,
Hyperbole.
Greenland.
Greenland.
Is that just hyperbole or is he serious about it?
Canada as the next U.S. state.
well, see the Canada thing. I think he's just trolling Justin
Yeah.
Trudeau. It's pure trolling. Calling him governor instead of prime minister, and look what happened to Justin Trudeau right now,
and they
right?
answered back. They're going to buy Alaska. It's a tit for tat.
I'm sure Russia is planning on taking Russia back as well. But I think in terms of the Panama Canal, if you're looking at Greenland, you're going to see a lot more. If you look at the ports in Panama, 2 of those 5 are owned by or operated by the Chinese. So like he's trying to steal away from their thunder and establish that American dominance back, which his voters wanted to see coming out of this president, right? Coming from not a Gulf of Mexico, but a Gulf of America. Like in terms of a political strategy thing, that enables him to his base even more that he's following through what he's
But how
saying.
do you know when to take him seriously and when to say that, he's probably just pushing his luck or he's just
Or
probably
trolling, or
pushing
trolling.
I
or
would
trolling?
look at the actions of his cabinet or his agencies that they're going to do and enforce his orders, and I'm going to look at the Congress on how he's going to try to navigate through those policies and push it down. Because at the end of the day, even though we have the Republican trifecta, it's slim margins, right? So there's still going to have to be some bipartisan support on a lot of these things, right? I mean, Chuck Schumer just talked about it. I just read something the other day where a good amount of not a good amount, but some Democrats are already supporting some of his immigration bills in the Senate.
Let's drill down. For example, the thing with Canada, how much of that is hyperbole? How much of that is I know he's trying to up tariffs and I suppose balance the trade deficit. There was a point he was talking about giving aid to Canada. I think he was talking about the deficit, the trade deficit. But those are not the same
I
thing.
mean,
It's basically trolling.
yeah. At the end of the day, he's a realtor, right? He sees 2 prime properties that can help him out or whatever. What's he going to do to make a play for that, right? Whether it's directly, indirectly, but either way, his unpredictability right now is changing the mindset and the landscape of these other leaders and other countries' political projections towards the United States or their next moves towards us. Because how are you going to deal? Nobody knows what he's thinking, right? And
Talking about unpredictability, what's his policy in the South China Sea? Is it unpredictable or more predictable?
I think when it comes to that, and I know we touched on that earlier outside, but I think that's an issue that they're going to remain the same.
Yeah.
I think from his first term in office and his, really making sure that his allies are taken care of, but also making sure that the allies are making their efforts to make it a fair transaction is what they really care about. But I think, when it comes to the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea stuff, I think we're going to see strong support from President Trump's administration towards this because it's,
John is
it's
the
the
first,
ironclad agreement.
he's the first convict to be elected president. What happens during his sentencing? Will he be? I'm not familiar with the rules in the U.S. What happens if he's sentenced?
So, like the one that I've seen that it says he's unconditional discharge. So what that means also, in terms of his presidency, this was off like a settlement. It wasn't a criminal case. It was more of that the New York one, if I'm correct. And so it's not going to matter anymore because he's going to be president by January 20th. And so a lot of that is the last play. From what I saw, that they're going to try to push more on some of his aides that were in this, but towards him, it's not going to land anything. It's their last-ditch effort to make a play on this, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Related to that, will he pardon those who were convicted and put in prison for the January 6 uprising?
So to them, if Joe Biden got to pardon his son for cases that he was guilty of, I think that according from President Trump's perspective and the Republicans, like these folks have suffered enough and been in jail long enough for 4 years over that, and it's never been proven.
So most probably he will pardon them.
I would imagine that. I think he said like the top folks might be if the ones that are really criminally. He won't, but like the folks that were, the women, the moms that were like caught for little petty crimes, I think those are the folks he pardons.
Mm-hmm.
What about in terms of trade and economy? Ronald mentioned it earlier. What will the impact on bilateral trade be?
Because he was talking about a trade war. He was talking about increasing taxes for cheap
Or the
products,
tariffs.
etc.
What will be the impact on
at
the
same
Philippines in particular?
At the same time, he was talking about bringing down inflation. It's a bit contradictory, putting tariffs up for cheap products and then bringing down inflation. It's not that easy.
I understand.
Yeah.
So, I think when it comes to a lot of this, he's negotiating, right? He's trying to put things in motion that A, will Congress support? B, will the rest of his economic advisors really go push for? But right now, it's he say, she say on what he's really going to do, because nobody really knows what he's going to do until he actually does it, right? But I think the economic advisors that he's put in play, the next cabinet that he's put in play or nominated are going to be really strong folks that are going to be really pushing his agenda forward. A, that focus on economy, B, on immigration, and C, on all his campaign promises that brings greatness back to America. Oh. So I think if you look at those wholesome in the cabinet secretaries and the people that he's trying to push and to nominate, you're going to see those results as well.
Ironclad commitment of the U.S. To the Philippines as far as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. And I suppose we don't expect major changes as far as that is concerned. But at the same time, Trump has been asking allies to, in a way, carry their own weight as far as security arrangements are concerned. Yeah. Are we going to see something like that with the Philippines coming from Trump?
Just an addition to that question, because in 2023, for the first time, Biden went away from the Kissinger strategic ambiguity foreign policy, which was dominant for more than 3 decades. And he said publicly that he will defend militarily Taiwan. That was the first time a U.S. president said that. And then Trump said that Taiwan has to pay for their defense. They have to pay for their defense. What does this mean? Because, yes, the West Philippine Sea issue, which we won in UNCLOS, is different from the Taiwan issue. It's different from the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, but they're also interrelated.
Yeah, they're interconnected.
They're not totally separate. So when Trump says that he will only defend Taiwan if they pay up, what will that be in relation to the West Philippine Sea, to the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea?
Yep.
No, so
Will it also mean eventually you also have to pay up?
Yeah. We have nothing to pay.
I mean, if
Ayuda.
that's a whole different topic, not my lane.
I
know my ayuda, but I'm staying in my lane on this one. But when it comes to that, I think, he's made clear, like, you can tell he's a businessman. He's about deals and making sure that the United States don't lose on their deals. Same thing, what the base has been talking about, the Republican, his MAGA base, has been focusing on the Ukraine-Russia issue, right? They want to help Ukraine win the war. They want to defeat Russia, but up to a cost and up to a plan. So far, Ukraine doesn't really provide a general plan of how they're going to use the money, when do they plan on finishing the war, but they're just asking for money. So the everyday American who is, paying thousands of dollars for mortgages on their daily bills and these things, they're seeing people in Washington, the people that they elected, are wanting to help the world be a better place, and they just want to keep sending money to Ukraine, right? And they see that. But what's the end goal for that? We've got a border in the south that's open, some in the north. How do we fix our problems back at home? Yeah. So I think if we look at it in that mentality and not necessarily we have to look at it from a Phil-Am perspective, but from an American perspective, that's what they're looking at. We want to help these countries, but those countries have to help themselves out as well in some point.
Well, when it comes to Ukraine, it's a different thing.
Correct,
because it's about Europe.
It's
because
NATO.
Ukraine cannot spend for their own defense because they're occupied. At least 30% of their land is occupied. So there's not revenues to finance.
But selling that to the everyday American who's the pain to the members of Congress in Washington, who they listen to, who they have to go back every weekend to and talk to them about this, they have to be able to explain
That's
that.
why the focus of President Trump is more on Europe. Now you have to increase your budget to help Ukraine as well as yourself.
Your share of NATO.
Because Ukraine cannot help themselves.
Right. And so, but he's also, I've seen some of the heritage papers that has come through that says, hey, if you increase the spending as well, I've seen some of your guest Richard's papers as well on talking about the Philippines can, purchase these Typhoon missiles if we increase our defense spending and the fast boats, and these are the things that the heritage was talking about as well. So in terms of a general thing, President Trump just wants to make sure that we're going to help you out, we're going to sell you some missiles, but at least up your defense spending budget as well. Do not necessarily a fair share, but like show an effort that you're making some.
But we just cut our
as well.
By 15 billion.
Ed, I'm telling you, I'm staying in my lane. I'm staying in my lane. That's your question for your
No,
man.
John,
by 9%, by
there are reports,
25%.
John, there are reports that Trump is arranging a meeting or at least a conversation with Vladimir Putin. You think there's a chance that he might persuade Russia to end the invasion?
Well,
I mean,
that's
the most positive appreciation of what's happening now, right? Because he seemed to be close, well, he seemed to be friendly with Putin, and will the Russian president listen to the incoming U.S. president?
I mean, I think they're going to have to have that conversation, but I don't know. That's a tough one to predict on what they're going to do. But I think Trump is going to be making a stance on this that's going to be pretty heavy on the first few days, because he's going to want to try to have the advantage when it comes to negotiation with Putin. So, I mean, if he's controlling the money, that's going to be what ultimately happens to it. But in Congress, he's going to have to convince those folks, because I mean, if you think the House is more towards Donald Trump, the Senate might not be as much for him, because it's still a tight margin, and the person who's holding the defense appropriation on this is Senator McConnell. So that's something that he's going to have to convince as well, while Senator McConnell is more of a traditional Republican, where it looks as national security and European security is very important towards the security of the United States. So those are some of the key parts that I think are going to be big in play in this, is not only how does he convince his MAGA base, but then also some of those traditional Republicans that's in the Senate as well.
What about in Gaza? We're getting conflicting ideas from the Trump camp. He's promised to put an end to the war. Can he actually do that?
I think that's his goal, is to end these wars. I think he's inheriting this from Biden. I think Biden has already given, kind of cut it loose and said, this is your problem now. So I've seen that, his ambassador to Israel and the folks, the envoy that's going to be a part of these, these areas of disruption, I think is what they called it, such as, I think his nominee is Rick Grinnell for it. Those are the folks that's going to be ending it, but they won't get into power until they get confirmed. So I'm sure they're back channeling on a lot of things now on how to make this happen. But as soon as those folks get confirmed, that's when they can kind of formally move it forward.
I was reviewing what you were saying a while ago. And I suppose it's, for the longest time, the American government was projected as the world's policeman. But in America, it's the government is not the policeman, but the taxman. So
They're definitely the tax.
So you have those two ways of looking at it. Let's go back to the Philippines. You're talking about, we're willing to sell you missiles, but you have to
Up your defense spending.
But that doesn't. I know you said you'll stay in your lane, but that doesn't seem to be what's been happening what's happening this year, and Lord knows about next year. So how is that going to affect us?
I think that the more that the United States puts their foot down when it comes to this, I mean, the Philippine government is going to be forced into doing something that kind of cooperates with that idea, right? How are they going to want what they need if they're not going to find a middle ground to meet them or meet the United States in somewhere? So I think Ambassador Babe's definitely got a big task on his hand.
But John, the military support of the U.S. to the Philippines is very minuscule. It's so unlike Pakistan. It's so unlike
or
Ukraine, Israel, etc. So yes, the demand to scale up our defense but we can only scale up so much.
Right.
No? Like Typhoon missiles are very expensive. No?
In fact,
But,
that's also a sore point
yeah.
for
Yeah.
many Filipinos that the U.S. spends so much for other
Yes.
countries, but for good old
Yeah.
for your good old buddy here
Yeah, yeah.
in Southeast Asia.
Especially now that the hub of the world is in this region.
in this
no?
Indo-Pacific theater. Right.
So if Trump is going to cut that minuscule military aid, no, and make it more minuscule, the message is that we are not interested in your region, no. So that is very politically loaded. No?
But in terms of that ironclad, we're still pursuing and following through these bases that's going to be put in the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's still within the first few steps, and I'm sure within the first 100 days of this administration, they're going to be able to really take a look at that and see if that's something that they're really going to push forward to. I think with the teams and the diplomat corps that we have in the United States and the relationship that we have with the Philippines, I think it's still going to be a top priority, especially as you mentioned, and I completely agree that the Indo-Pacific is the theater that's going to be more important in this next 4 years.
Yes.
So I think, us being a frontline ally is a good thing in the Philippines as a Phil-Am. That's something that I'm passionate about as well in these issues. So wherever I go in the United States, Democrat, Republican, I always talk about how important the West Philippine Sea is in terms of the global theater in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
John, in terms of social media, information technology, cyber issues, what can we expect? Elon Musk is one of his closest advisors, and he has been targeting TikTok. And we've heard from Meta they are moving to stop what's been criticized as censorship, at least in the U.S. What can we expect?
Well, I think he's going to go hard on when it comes to censorship. That's something that he's been very prominent about. Some of the people that he's brought on is big into as well, especially taking a hold of these big tech companies and making sure that freedoms of information and speech and news is what important. So I would expect some heavy stuff coming from him when it comes to that. I know the Congress as well is in a very good position to move this forward. The Energy and Commerce Committee in the United States House is prioritizing this as well. So I'm sure that this is going to be a top of the line and top priority for the Trump administration this next 4 years.
Yeah. I have a very political question.
Here we go.
You mean that this is your first political question?
Yes. The others are not very political. No? Where is Melania Trump nowadays? No, because
Is that political?
I love that.
she's been very a bit scarce, no, compared in the previous Trump presidency. So where is she now? Why isn't she in the limelight nowadays? So where has she been staying? No.
Well, I don't know where she's been staying. That's within the Secret Service.
Very political.
Very political.
But I think Mrs. Trump has definitely been more active in terms of the limelight now. You saw her at the New Year gala that they had at Mar-a-Lago, spoiling the new Trump YMCA dance that took over. I'm going to be intrigued to see on what type of policies that she's going to try to push and initiatives that she wants to help out when it comes to the Trump administration. But as you can see, even from 2016 to now, it's all been about the Trump family. Even in 2016, yes, she was visible, but she never really projected or said things, right? It was more Ivanka. Ivanka introduced him at the RNC convention, and now this time around it was Donald Trump Jr. And
Ivanka said that she will no longer be in the political limelight.
Yes, because it really affected their business, and Jared Kushner is more focused on raising their families. But in terms now, I mean, you can see Donald Trump Jr. has definitely been a lot more elevated than Melania. Donald Trump Jr. went to Greenland as well, so it's becoming still more of a family affair when it comes to the Trumps. But I'm very optimistic that we're going to have a very beautiful and a very visible Mrs. Melania Trump on the next inauguration as their first lady again.
I get Canada with the tariff issue and all that, but what about Greenland? Where does Greenland come in? Why is he making all these noises about Greenland? I understand there's also a U.S. base there, a U.S. Station there.
Right.
Is that the center of everything?
No, they had an Air Force base there, and they for a little time occupied it during World War II, but I think this is still more of a negotiation tactic when it comes to the China issue, right? Whether it's controlling the waterways around it or the shipping lines around it, those are, you know, it looks to us as different, but there's always a thing behind it on why he's doing that. I think he's got enough data to show that, oh, well, maybe the Chinese are playing around this area. How do we find a way to take that issue over and put it towards the Americans rather than Denmark, Greenland, all these Europeans are cowering towards Chinese. So I think that's his biggest priority.
How much is the selling price now for Alaska? Because Canada wants to buy it.
I don't know if Canada can afford it now.
Yeah.
You know, we'll see. You know, for them to approve a price, you know, be tough with inflation from the Russians. Might be triple, according to Trump.